She knew every corner, every neighbor, and every routine in the house. After 20 years of living there, she had completely forgotten one basic fact: the property was never hers. When the landlord's health began to decline, her behavior escalated. She refused to communicate, picked fights with the other tenants, and created daily household friction. When the landlord finally confronted her about the tension, she didn't apologize. She called the police. Many property owners in Singapore assume stories like this only happen overseas. There is a common belief that the local, highly efficient legal system automatically shields landlords from nightmare tenants. The reality is quite different. You cannot legally force a long-term tenant to vacate overnight, especially if there is any form of written agreement or if the dispute enters legal territory. What feels like a secure asset can quickly devolve into a trapped liability. The hidden mechanism driving this behavior is known as psychological ownership. This happens when structured legal agreements are completely replaced by informal trust. This shift doesn't occur after a single missed rent payment. It builds slowly, methodically, eroding boundaries over months and years. A tenancy that begins in year one with a respectful, rule-abiding occupant can twist into an entirely different dynamic by year 10, producing an entitled occupant who challenges authority and treats the space as their own. By allowing a tenant to stay indefinitely without enforcing clear boundaries, the legal owner systematically loses control of their own property. By the time they try to regain that control, the dynamic has already shifted. This chart shows the typical timeline of a deteriorating tenancy. From year 1 to year 5, the tenant usually pays on time, but subtly they start pushing boundaries, entering a phase we can call the comfortable zone. The root cause here is usually the landlord. By relying entirely on trust-based arrangements, they skip critical steps like securing a formal agreement or keeping proper NRIC identification records. NRIC is Singapore's National Registration Identity Card, a basic requirement for legal traceability. You will start hearing verbal warning signs. The tenant might casually drop phrases like, "I've been staying here for so long already," or "This is basically my place." Because the boundaries were never strictly defined on paper, this early informality breeds a sense of entitlement. The landlord becomes unintentionally complicit in the erosion of their own authority. This diagram tracks what happens between years 5 and 10. Boundary erosion feeds directly into conflict, pushing the tenant into a phase of defensive resistance. The entire power dynamic flips. They stop responding to calls. They refuse to let the owner enter the premises, ignore direct instructions, and start frequent, spreading disputes with neighbors or co-tenants. Their primary defensive tactic is weaponizing the authorities. By calling the police or lodging complaints, they actively stall the eviction process and create a dense layer of legal complication. The tenant has successfully reframed the relationship in their own mind. At this stage, any legitimate request from the legal owner is treated as an illegal invasion of the tenant's personal space. Now, add a catastrophic variable to this timeline: an elderly landlord. When an owner is dealing with declining health or cognitive strain, they suddenly become a highly visible target. This introduces the predatory opportunist. This type of tenant moves past simple boundary pushing and begins actively exploiting the owner's vulnerability for personal gain. The mechanics of this trap are terrifyingly simple. We see scenarios where tenants start drafting agreements themselves, packing the terms heavily in their favor, and obtaining rapid signatures before the elderly owner can fully comprehend what they are agreeing to. The immediate consequence is that what started as a casual, informal arrangement suddenly transforms into a binding legal complication with serious weight behind it. The tenant has successfully weaponized the landlord's trust to legally seize control, a calculated act of elder exploitation. Most people look at a bad tenant and assume the only real damage is a few months of unpaid rent. That is a massive underestimation of the systemic damage involved. This chart illustrates the true cost. Unpaid rent is just the beginning. The real damage hits 3 pillars: financial drain of legal fees, emotional stress of daily conflict, and the massive opportunity cost of a frozen asset, unable to be sold or re-rented. The primary shield against this is a properly structured tenancy agreement. Not a basic template downloaded from the internet, but a strict contract that clearly defines your rights and includes specific exit clauses. You also have to implement rigorous behavioral screening. Check their employment, verify their background before anyone signs anything. And if the owner is elderly or unwell, you must establish professional legal oversight to manage the property directly. Successful property investment depends on managing people risk, the one factor that can undo even the best location or market timing. Sometimes the absolute greatest threat to your asset is the person living inside it. The scariest part about nightmare tenants is not how they start. It is how long they are allowed to quietly continue without anyone stepping in to enforce the rules. Have you ever dealt with a tenant who felt a little too comfortable or watched a neighbor lose control of their property? Let us know in the comments below. If you rely on informal agreements or feel your tenant resisting authority, do not wait for the situation to escalate. You can book a private consultation with Jolin Co. to structure a secure, airtight tenancy framework today. Take action to protect your investment now, because in property management, the most devastating mistakes